For the next module, we're going to talk about religion. And one of the readings that I assigned talks a little bit about the demography of American religion. Now, we all know that the United States is a very pluralistic nation with lots of different religious groups, but that pluralism masks a lot of regional homogeneity. There are lots of different churches in the United States, but they're not all equally distributed. This map here shows by county which religious group is the largest for that county. And as you can see, the blue, the text is too small to read, but the blue that covers most of the map is Catholicism, the nation's largest religion. The red is the Southern Baptist Convention, covered in the southeast. The little orange up in Minnesota and the Dakotas is the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America, and the gray that covers Utah and parts of Idaho and Wyoming are the Mormons. And so there's lots of pluralism in the United States, but different denominations have a different domain, and they have a different cultural flavor. And so for this reason, the United States has a sort of a geography is destiny situation where you are likely to be raised in a particular religious faith based on where you grew up. So let's take a look at some of the largest religious groups in the United States and look at how they are distributed. The first group is the largest, the Roman Catholic Church, by far the largest church denomination in America, constituting about 20% of the population. And as you can see, in most counties, it is the predominant faith. The only places where it is not a regional majority are in the southeast and in Utah. And you can see that Catholics are pretty much found nationwide. And within Catholicism, there's lots of diversity. People whose ancestors came from Ireland and Italy and Poland are very likely to be Catholic, but so are Latinos who came from Mexico or Puerto Rico. So this is the largest religion by far in the United States. The largest Protestant denomination is the Southern Baptist Convention. Now, there are lots of different kinds of Baptists, but the SBC is the largest denomination. And one of the things that you will see is that Southern Baptists and Catholics are like oil and water. Where Baptists predominate, Catholics are rare, and where Catholics predominate, Baptists are rare. Look at that. And so what you have is a regional Southern subculture that is intertwined with the Southern Baptist Church, the largest Protestant denomination. And this is why the South is culturally distinct, why it has its own sort of evangelical flavor, and where the Republican Party has a unique stronghold because of its association with these conservative traditions of the Southern Baptist Church. The second largest Protestant denomination is the United Methodist Church, and this church is generally spread fairly evenly east of the Continental Divide. As you can see, the red dots are where it's most prominent, the orange dots next most prominent, and you can see that it is a fairly robust church, well represented throughout the eastern half of the country. And the United Methodist Church is generally considered to be a moderate Christian church. It is not associated as much with conservative politics like the Southern Baptist Church is. It's called it's one of the mainline denominations. It's considered the sort of moderate mainstream Protestant denomination. The next largest Protestant denomination is the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. And this is the church of Norwegian and Swedish immigrants who settled the Dakotas and the area around Minnesota and Wisconsin. If you've ever heard Garrison Keillor and the Prairie Home Companion on PBS, he makes fun of his Lutheran upbringing in Minnesota and jokes a lot about what Lutheran culture is like. This church is very regionally concentrated, as you can see. Hardly any representation outside of Minnesota, Wisconsin, and the Dakotas. And this church has a very moderate association with politics, a very middle-of-the-road kind of Protestant church. The most uniquely distributed and geographically isolated large denomination in the United States is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or the Mormons. They're generally less than 1% of the population in most states, but they have an area of distinct concentration in Utah and southeast Idaho. There's no denomination that dominates a state the way that Utah is dominated by the Mormons. They constitute about 60% of the population, and that's down from in the 90s when it would have been, upwards of 70% of the population. And this concentration gives Utah a very unique religious subculture. A lot's been written on it. It's very different from Protestantism, has different doctrines, different beliefs, different scriptures. So these are some of the larger denominations in the United States and how they are distributed throughout the country. As you can see, they're not evenly distributed. So there's lots of pluralism in the United States, but that pluralism is comprised of lots of regional concentration. In most states, the largest religious group are people with no religion. And in states where they're not the largest religious group, they're typically the second largest religious group. These are people who don't have any church at all, who don't have any religion at all. And as you can see, it varies from the most religious state, which is Mississippi, where only 10% are unaffiliated, all the way up to New Hampshire and Vermont, where about a third of people have no church, or Oregon, where over a third say they have no religion. Now, this doesn't mean they're atheists or that they don't believe in God, or it's just that they don't have any kind of religion. When you ask them on surveys, what's your religion? They tend to say none. And you can see that people with no religion are concentrated in the western United States and in New England. Now, there are some demographic characteristics of people with no religion. First is their numbers are on the rise. Pew did a group called Pew Research Associates did a survey of swing states because they are important for elections, and they look at Iowa, Virginia, and North Carolina, and then they did. There was a follow-up done in 2014, and what you can see is that the percentage of these states that are members of standard majority Protestant bodies is declining, while people who are religiously unaffiliated are increasing. And we see that there's a large increase in the number of people who are telling survey researchers that they don't have any religious affiliation. And here you can see how that varies by age. Among people 18 to 29, the blue line, 30 to 49, the red line, or 50 plus, the green line, there has been a distinct increase in the number of people with no religion, starting in about 1990 and cresting in this decade. But you can see that younger people are even less likely to have religion than are middle-aged people or older people. So having no religion is something that is more common among the young and something that is becoming more common generally. If you ask people in a survey, the latest data I have on this is from 2008, but I don't think it has changed much. If you ask people regarding the existence of God, do you think, and these are the response categories, there's no such thing, there is no way to know, I'm not sure, there is a higher power but no personal God, or there definitely is a personal God, about 70% say there definitely is a personal God. But that means, 6% refuse, but that means about a quarter of people either don't believe in a personal God. Either they say, well, there's some sort of higher power, but there's no personal God, or they don't know, or there's no way to know, or they don't believe it. So we often think about the United States as a religious nation, but it's not as religious as some people might think. There is a lot of irreligion, and that is increasing. Okay? If you ask people, is religion very important in your life? It varies by state. In Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, Louisiana, Tennessee, most of these southern states, you see high levels of people who say that religion is very important in their lives. 82% in Mississippi. But look at the states where there is, look at the top 10 states and then compare them to the bottom states. In New Hampshire and Vermont, only 36%, barely a third, say that religion is important in their life. And again, you can see the regional variation here. The states where religion is important are the southern states. The states where religion is not important are the states in the western United States or in New England generally. Okay. Now look at Florida. The darker red are evangelical Protestants, the so-called Christian right, evangelicals. And you can see that they tend to be concentrated in North Florida. Now look at Catholics. The darker red is more dense concentration, and you can see that Catholics are concentrated in South Florida. Remember what I said about the United States generally, that evangelical Protestants, like Southern Baptists, and Catholics are like oil and water. Where one predominates, the other tends not to be found. You can see that in Florida, northern Florida is more like the South, and South Florida is more like the North. We've known that for a long time about Florida, that it's, the further north you go in Florida, the further south you are. Or the further south you go in Florida, the further north you are. Jacksonville is much more representative of a state like, or looks much more like a state like Alabama or Mississippi than it does like the southern part of the state. Among denominations with over 10,000 members in Jacksonville, you have the Southern Baptist Convention that dominates over all others. Catholics are in second place. Non-denominational people who are otherwise religious, who just call themselves Christians to survey researchers, they're the third most common. And how have things changed over the decades? Well, the Catholics have increased in Jacksonville between 1990 and 2010, 92.4%. And that's largely an influx of Latinos. The Assemblies of God, a charismatic Pentecostal type church, has grown a lot. The Southern Baptists have grown largely through natural increase, large families. And these mainline churches, the Methodist Church, the Episcopal Church, those churches have lost members in Jacksonville. So that's a little bit about the religious demography of the United States, of Florida,